Welcome, fierce souls, to a world where power recognizes power and destiny cannot be denied. Meet Kieran Blackthorne, an alpha who commands respect with a single glance, whose very presence bends others to his will. For 15 years, he has ruled the Shadow Moon Pack with an iron fist wrapped in calculated control. Boardrooms bow to his business empire. Rival alphas think twice before crossing his territory. His pack follows without question, until the night fate delivers him a mate he cannot control, and everything he thought he knew about dominance crumbles beneath the fire in her emerald eyes. Some bonds cannot be broken. Some challenges cannot be ignored. And some women are born to stand beside kings, not kneel before them. Chapter 1. The mahogany conference table groaned under the weight of Kieran Blackthorne's fist as it connected with the polished surface. Every man in the room, 12 of the most powerful businessmen in the Pacific Northwest, flinched at the sound. Every man except Kieran himself, whose storm-gray eyes remained fixed on the trembling fool across from him. "You want to explain to me?" Kieran's voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor itself, how a multi-million-dollar development project just disappears from the city planning committee. Richard Pemberton, a man who'd built his fortune on the bones of smaller companies, looked ready to crawl under the table. Sweat beaded on his balding forehead despite the October chill seeping through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor. There were complications, Pemberton stammered. Environmental concerns. Community pushback. The mayor's office. The mayor's office, Kieran interrupted, rising slowly from his chair. That owes its campaign funding to my contributions? That mayor's office. At 6'4" with shoulders that stretched his custom Italian suit to perfection, Kieran Blackthorne was a force of nature contained in human form. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven and sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that made grown men reconsider their life choices, gray as a winter storm and twice as merciless. The other board members exchanged nervous glances. They were all successful men in their own right, captains of industry who'd clawed their way to the top. But in Kieran's presence, they felt like cubs in the den of an apex predator. "Sir," ventured James Morrison, Kieran's second-in-command and the closest thing to a friend the Alpha allowed himself. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." Kieran's gaze snapped to James, and the Beta immediately fell silent. The hierarchy was clear, unspoken, and absolute. "No," Kieran said softly, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made armies march and empires rise. "Mr. Pemberton clearly has something he wants to share with all of us. Don't you, Richard?" Pemberton's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "There's a new player in town. Someone who's been buying up properties in the development zone. Paying cash over asking price. The community board loves her because she's promising to preserve the historical character of the neighborhood. Her." The single word cracked like a whip. "Sophia Rivers. She runs some kind of architectural preservation firm. Moved here from Portland about 6 months ago. She's made quite an impression." Kieran's fingers drummed once, twice against the table's surface. The sound echoed like gunshots in the silence. "Show me." Pemberton's hands shook as he fumbled with his tablet, pulling up a photograph. He slid it across the table like a man handling a live grenade. The woman staring back at Kieran from the screen was nothing like he'd expected. Where he'd imagined some aging hippie activist or trust fund do-gooder, he found fierce intelligence blazing from emerald eyes set in a face that belonged on magazine covers. Auburn hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and even in the candid shot, taken at what appeared to be a community meeting, her posture radiated confidence and determination. Something stirred deep in Kieran's chest, a recognition he couldn't name and didn't trust. "What's her background?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Master's degree in architecture from UC Berkeley, specialization in historical preservation. She's worked on major projects up and down the West Coast. Never stays in one place too long." Pemberton seemed to gain confidence as he recited facts. "No family ties that we can find. No significant romantic relationships. She bought a Victorian house on Maple Street and lives alone." Alone. The word resonated through Kieran in ways that had nothing to do with business strategy. "Sir?" James leaned forward slightly. "How would you like us to proceed?" Kieran stared at the photograph for another long moment, memorizing the stubborn tilt of her chin, the way her eyes seemed to look directly through the camera and into his soul. "Set up a meeting," he said finally. "I want to see what Miss Rivers is really made of." The boardroom emptied with the efficiency of men who knew better than to linger in the presence of a predator planning his hunt. James remained behind, gathering papers with practiced ease. "Kieran," he said quietly once they were alone, "are you sure direct confrontation is the best approach? This woman has clearly done her homework. She's got the community on her side, the environmental groups backing her, and from what I hear, she's not easily intimidated." Kieran moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the city sprawling below. His city. Every building, every street, every soul in it fell under his protection and, when necessary, his dominion. "James," he said without turning around, "in 15 years of leadership, when have you ever seen me fail to acquire something I wanted?" "Never, sir." "Then why would I start now?" But even as he spoke the words, Kieran felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. The woman in the photograph didn't look like someone who could be bought, threatened, or charmed. She looked like someone who would meet his gaze without flinching and tell him exactly what she thought of his empire. The thought should have annoyed him. Instead, it sent a thrill of anticipation down his spine that he couldn't explain and didn't dare examine too closely. Outside, the sun was setting over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Somewhere in the city below, Sophia Rivers was probably working late in her Victorian house, surrounded by blueprints and historical documents, completely unaware that she had just declared war on the most powerful alpha in the Pacific Northwest. Kieran smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. He couldn't wait to meet her. The elevator chimed softly as it arrived at the executive floor. Kieran stepped inside, his reflection multiplied infinitely in the polished chrome walls. For a moment, he looked like what he truly was, not just a businessman, but an apex predator in an expensive suit, with eyes that held the weight of ancient power and the promise of absolute dominance. Tomorrow, he would arrange to meet the woman who dared to challenge his plans. Tonight, he would dream of emerald eyes and wonder why his wolf was suddenly restless for the first time in years. Chapter 2. The Victorian house at 412 Maple Street was a testament to craftsmanship from another era. Its gabled roof and wraparound porch spoke of times when builders created homes to last generations, not decades. Morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting jeweled patterns across hardwood floors that had been lovingly restored to their original glory. Sophia Rivers knelt in the center of her living room, surrounded by an organized chaos of blueprints, historical surveys, and photographs dating back to the 1890s. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun secured with what appeared to be a vintage fountain pen, and reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied a particularly detailed architectural drawing. She was completely absorbed in her work when the doorbell rang. "Just a minute," she called, not looking up from the blueprint that showed the original layout of the Hartwell Building, one of the structures in Kieran Blackthorne's development zone. The building had been constructed in 1902 by a craftsman who'd signed his work in tiny, precise lettering along the foundation stones. Most people would demolish it without a second thought, but Sophia saw the story it told, the history it held. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. With a sigh, Sophia pushed her glasses up into her hair and rose gracefully to her feet. She padded to the front door in her stocking feet, dressed in worn jeans and a cable-knit sweater that had seen better days, but was comfortable as armor. Through the leaded glass panels beside the door, she could make out a tall, broad-shouldered figure. Probably another neighbor wanting to discuss the community meeting from last night, or perhaps a reporter following up on the story about her preservation initiative. She opened the door with a welcoming smile that died the instant she saw who was standing on her porch. The man before her radiated power like a living electrical field. Even in the casual setting of her front porch, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal coat over what appeared to be another perfectly fitted suit, He commanded attention. His storm-gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her feel suddenly, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and the fact that she was wearing mismatched socks. But Sophia Rivers hadn't built her career by backing down from intimidation, no matter how attractively packaged. "Mr. Blackthorne, I presume." Her voice was steady, controlled. She didn't step back or invite him in. "I was wondering when you'd show up." If Kieran was surprised by her immediate recognition or her lack of deference, he didn't show it. Instead, one corner of his mouth lifted in what might generously be called a smile. "Miss Rivers, may I come in?" It wasn't really a question. Most people, Sophia suspected, didn't say no to Kieran Blackthorne. The way he stood, the subtle way he angled his body, even his tone of voice, everything about him suggested a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted, exactly when he wanted it. Which was precisely why Sophia's next words surprised them both.
"No."
The single syllable hung in the morning air between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Kieran's gray eyes sharpened, focusing on her with the kind of attention she imagined he usually reserved for hostile takeovers or pack challenges. "I beg your pardon?" "I said no." Sophia leaned against her doorframe, crossing her arms over her chest. The gesture was casual, but it had the effect of creating a clear barrier between them. "This is my home, Mr. Blackthorne, not your boardroom. If you want to have a conversation, we can do it right here on the porch, or you can make an appointment like a civilized human being." For a long moment, they stared at each other in a battle of wills that felt like so much more than a simple disagreement about meeting locations. Sophia could feel heat radiating from him, could smell the faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with something wilder, more elemental. Her pulse quickened, though whether from anger or something else entirely, she refused to examine. "You're not what I expected," Kieran said finally, his voice lower, rougher than it had been moments before. "What did you expect?" Some trembling little mouse who would roll over the moment the big bad wolf showed up at her door. Something flickered in his eyes at her choice of words, gone too quickly for her to interpret. "I expected someone who understood the reality of the situation." "Oh, I understand reality perfectly." Sophia's emerald eyes flashed. "You're used to getting your way through money, intimidation, or sheer force of personality. You walk into rooms and people fall over themselves to please you. You've probably never heard the word no in a business context in your entire adult life. And yet here you are, saying it." There was something almost admiring in his tone now, though his posture remained predatory, controlled. "Here I am," she agreed. "And I'll keep saying it as long as you keep trying to destroy buildings that matter to this community." Kieran took a step closer, moving into her personal space with a fluid confidence of someone who had never met a boundary he couldn't cross. Sophia held her ground, tilting her chin up to maintain eye contact. She was tall for a woman, but he still towered over her, his presence seeming to fill the entire porch. "Those buildings," he said quietly, "are standing in the way of progress. Of jobs, economic growth, affordable housing. Your pretty little preservation project might make you feel good, Miss Rivers, but it won't put food on families' tables or roofs over their heads. And your soulless glass towers will?"
"Yes."
"They will." The absolute certainty in his voice was maddening. Sophia felt her temper, usually well-controlled, begin to simmer. "Let me guess, you grew up somewhere else, decided Seattle was ripe for development, and moved in to extract maximum profit with minimum regard for what was already here. Am I close?" Something dangerous flashed across Kieran's features. "You know nothing about what I've built here. Nothing about what this city means to me or how hard I've worked to make it better." Better for whom? The developers getting rich off demolition contracts? The construction companies building your monuments to ego? Or the families who've lived in those neighborhoods for generations and are getting priced out by your affordable housing? Sophia turned to face him, noting the way he lounged in his chair with deceptive casualness. Everything about his posture suggested relaxation, but his eyes were sharp, focused, predatory. "I'm sorry," she said with perfect politeness. "Are you part of the public comment period now, Mr. Blackthorne?" A ripple of tension moved through the room. Commissioner Martinez cleared her throat nervously. "Mr. Blackthorne, if you have questions, they should be directed through proper channels. Of course. Kieran rose to his feet with fluid grace, buttoning his jacket with movements that somehow managed to look both civilized and threatening. May I approach the microphone, Commissioner? Within moments, he was standing less than 3 feet from Sophia, close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the exact shade of gray in his eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough to be dangerous. Miss Rivers raises interesting points about architectural preservation, he said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made people lean in to listen. But she hasn't addressed the fundamental question. What's the cost of her proposal, and who pays it? The cost, Sophia began. The cost, Kieran continued, speaking over her with the effortless dominance of someone accustomed to controlling conversations, isn't just financial, though adaptive reuse typically runs 30 to 40% higher than new construction. The real cost is time. While Miss Rivers conducts her surveys and proposes her alternatives, Seattle families remain priced out of the housing market. While she advocates for empty buildings, children go to bed in overcrowded apartments and young couples give up on homeownership. It was masterfully done, Sophia had to admit. He'd positioned her as someone who cared more about dead buildings than living people, made her preservation work sound like elitist indulgence while he fought for families and children. The fact that it was partially true made it even more infuriating. Mr. Blackthorne makes valid points about housing needs, she said, her voice level despite the way her temper was beginning to simmer. But he's presenting a false choice. This isn't about choosing buildings over people, it's about choosing sustainable development over short-term profit. She turned to address the commissioners directly, deliberately positioning herself so that Kieran was at her back. It was a risk, but she needed to break the spell of his presence, the way he seemed to fill the room and command attention simply by existing. Adaptive reuse projects have higher upfront costs, but significantly lower long-term maintenance expenses. They create unique housing stock that maintains property values over time rather than the cookie-cutter developments that become tomorrow's slums. Most importantly, they preserve the character and identity that make neighborhoods worth living in. Pretty words, Kieran said quietly, and something in his tone made her turn around to face him again. But Seattle families can't eat character, and they can't pay rent with identity. They were standing close now, closer than was professionally appropriate, their argument having drawn them together like magnets. Sophia could see flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could see the exact moment his gaze dropped to her mouth before snapping back up. The room around them seemed to fade into background noise. This wasn't about zoning laws or construction permits anymore. This was something primal, electric, dangerous. Commissioners, Martinez said loudly, clearly trying to regain control of the meeting. Perhaps we should move to a formal vote. Wait. The word came from Sophia, though she wasn't entirely sure she'd meant to say it. I have a proposal. Kieran's eyebrows rose slightly. Around the room, she could feel the attention of everyone present focusing on her like a spotlight. What kind of proposal? Commissioner Bradley asked. Sophia's mind raced. She was about to offer something she hadn't planned, something that could either save the Harbor District buildings or destroy her credibility entirely. But looking at Kieran, seeing the challenge in his eyes, she found herself taking the kind of risk she normally avoided. Give me 30 days, she said. Let me work with Blackthorne Development to create a hybrid proposal. If I can design an adaptive reuse plan that meets their timeline and budget requirements, you delay the demolition permits. If I can't, she took a breath. Then I withdraw my objections and the project moves forward as planned. The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison looked like he wanted to object, but a subtle gesture from Kieran kept him quiet. The commissioners exchanged glances, clearly intrigued by the possibility of avoiding a prolonged fight. And Kieran was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read, something that might have been respect and definitely included surprise. Mr. Blackthorne? Commissioner Martinez asked. Would your company be willing to participate in such a collaboration? Kieran's gaze never left Sophia's face. Miss Rivers has made an interesting offer, he said slowly. But if we're going to work together, I have conditions. Name them. Full access to your research and methodologies. Complete transparency about costs, timelines, and feasibility studies. And his smile was sharp as a blade. All meetings take place on neutral ground. I'm not standing on your porch again. Heat flashed up Sophia's neck at the memory. Agreed. Then we have a deal. Kieran extended his hand. Sophia stared at it for a moment, knowing that shaking his hand would change everything, that she was about to enter into some kind of partnership with a man who made her pulse race and her judgment falter. A man who represented everything she usually fought against. A man she was dangerously close to wanting in ways that had nothing to do with architecture or development or any of the professional reasons that had brought them into conflict. She took his hand. The moment their palms touched, electricity shot up her arm. Kieran's fingers closed around hers with just enough pressure to be possessive, and his thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture that was either accidental or deliberate provocation. 30 days, he said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. 30 days, she agreed. Neither of them let go immediately. Around them, the commissioners were discussing scheduling and logistics, but Sophia barely heard them. All she could focus on was the heat of Kieran's skin against hers, the way his eyes seemed to see straight through her professional composure to something wilder underneath. When they finally broke contact, her hand felt cold, incomplete. This should be interesting, Kieran murmured, and something in his tone suggested he wasn't talking about architecture at all. Sophia gathered her materials and made her way back to the gallery, hyper-aware of his presence behind her. She'd just agreed to work with the most dangerous man she'd ever met, a man who commanded rooms and bent people to his will with the casual ease of someone who'd never learned to doubt his own power. A man who looked at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve, regardless of whether she wanted to be solved or not. 30 days. She had 30 days to save the Harbor District buildings and prove that preservation could coexist with progress. 30 days to work closely with Kieran Blackthorne without losing herself in the process. As she packed her portfolio, Sophia had the sinking feeling that she'd just agreed to the most dangerous deal of her professional life. And the most personally treacherous 30 days she'd ever face. Chapter 4. The Pike Place Market was not where Sophia had expected to have her first official meeting with Kieran Blackthorne. When he'd suggested neutral ground, she'd imagined some upscale restaurant or sterile conference room, not the chaotic sensory overload of Seattle's most famous market. But here she was at 7 a.m, clutching a cup of coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead, watching Kieran move through the maze of vendors with the easy confidence of someone who belonged everywhere he went. He looked different here, she realized. Still commanding, still impossibly attractive in his dark jeans and wool peacoat, but somehow more human. He stopped at a flower vendor to exchange what appeared to be genuine pleasantries with an elderly woman who called him Kenny and insisted on tucking a single white rose into his jacket pocket. He knew the names of the fish vendors, the cheesemakers, the couple who sold handmade pottery near the entrance. This wasn't the cold corporate shark she'd expected. This was a man who had roots in this city, who belonged to it in ways that went deeper than business deals and development projects. The realization unsettled her more than his boardroom intimidation tactics ever could. "You look surprised," Kieran said, appearing at her elbow with the silent grace that seemed to be his trademark. He held 2 paper bags that smelled like heaven and probably contained enough calories to fuel a small army. "I didn't expect." Sophia gestured vaguely at the market around them, at the easy familiarity he'd shown with the vendors. "This. What did you expect?" A Shark Tank conference room with intimidating corporate art and uncomfortable chairs designed to put visitors at a psychological disadvantage. The fact that he described exactly what she'd expected made heat rise in her cheeks. Maybe. Kieran's smile was genuine this time, lacking the predatory edge she'd become accustomed to. "I've been coming here since I was 16. First job was hauling crates for the fish vendors during summer breaks. Maria there." He nodded toward the flower vendor, who was now serving another customer. "She used to sneak me sandwiches when I couldn't afford lunch."
16.
That meant he'd been in Seattle for. Sophia did quick math. At least 15 years, probably more. Long enough to build not just a business empire, but genuine connections. Long enough for this city to become truly home. "Where did you grow up?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, too personal for their professional relationship, but somehow feeling necessary. Something shuddered in Kieran's eyes, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Everywhere and nowhere. Foster care has a way of making sure you never get too attached to any one place. The casual way he delivered the information, as if discussing the weather, somehow made it more heartbreaking. Sophia felt something twist in her chest, a dangerous softening toward this man who is supposed to be her adversary. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be. It taught me to make my own family, my own home." He gestured toward the bustling market around them. "This city gave me that chance. The people here took a chance on an angry kid with more attitude than sense and helped me build something worth protecting." The passion in his voice was unmistakable, and suddenly his fierce protection of his development projects made sense. This wasn't about profit margins or corporate expansion. This was about a man who'd found home and would do anything to make it better for the people who'd welcomed him. "That's why the housing project matters so much to you," Sophia said. It wasn't a question. Seattle's changing. Growing. People are getting priced out of the neighborhoods their families have lived in for generations. The Harbor District development isn't just about profit. It's about making sure the city remains home for everyone, not just the tech millionaires moving in from California. They found a small table overlooking Elliott Bay, the morning sun turning the water into liquid silver. Kieran unpacked the paper bags with surprising efficiency, revealing an assortment that looked like he'd bought one of everything: fresh salmon bagels, berry scones, local cheese, seasonal fruit, and pastries that looked too beautiful to eat. "I wasn't sure what you'd like," he said with something that might have been embarrassment. "And I haven't eaten yet." The admission that the all-powerful Kieran Blackthorne might be uncertain about anything was so unexpected that Sophia found herself smiling. "This is perfect. Thank you." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching tourists and locals alike navigate the market's organized chaos. Sophia found herself stealing glances at Kieran when she thought he wasn't looking, trying to reconcile this version of him, relaxed, almost gentle, with the dominant force of nature she'd encountered in boardrooms and city planning meetings. "So," Kieran said finally, pulling out a tablet and setting it between them. "Show me what you're thinking." "Business."
Right.
This was why they were here. Sophia pulled out her own materials, grateful to have something concrete to focus on besides the way morning light played across Kieran's features. "I've been studying the buildings more closely," she began, spreading out several architectural drawings. The Hartwell building is the obvious centerpiece, but there are 3 other structures that could be incorporated into a mixed-use development. Kieran leaned forward to study the drawings, and Sophia caught a hint of his cologne mixed with something that was purely him, warm, masculine, distracting. She forced herself to focus on the blueprints. The ground floors could be converted to retail and restaurant space, she continued, pointing to specific areas on the plans. The upper floors would make unique residential units. You'd lose some density compared to new construction, but you'd gain character and marketability. "Show me the numbers." Sophia pulled up a spreadsheet on her tablet, hyper-aware of the way Kieran moved his chair closer to get a better view. Their shoulders were almost touching now, and she could feel heat radiating from his body. Initial construction costs would be approximately 30% higher than demolition and rebuild, she admitted. But the timeline could actually be shorter: no demolition phase, no environmental impact studies, no historical review delays. Kieran studied the figures with the kind of focused intensity that made her understand how he'd built his business empire. His questions were sharp, specific, informed. He understood construction costs, permit processes, market dynamics in ways that impressed her despite herself. The residential units would be smaller than standard new construction, he pointed out, but more distinctive. "Look," Sophia pulled up photos from similar projects she'd worked on. "These aren't cookie-cutter apartments. They're homes with character, architectural details, stories. People pay premium prices for authenticity." "People like you pay premium prices for authenticity," Kieran corrected. "Working families just want space, safety, and affordable rent. You're underestimating your market." Sophia found herself leaning closer, their argument drawing them together the way it had at the city planning meeting. Young professionals, artists, small families, they want something unique. Something that feels like home, not like a corporate housing unit. And what makes you so certain about what people want? The question was asked quietly, but there was something underneath it that made Sophia look up from the spreadsheets to find Kieran watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with construction costs. She faltered, caught in the storm-gray depths of his eyes. I've worked on projects like this before. Have you? His voice was closer now, though she couldn't remember him moving. Or are you projecting your own desires onto other people's needs? The words should have stung. They were probably even partially true. But the way he said them, the way he was looking at her, it didn't feel like criticism. It felt like challenge, like he was pushing her to examine her own motivations. Maybe, she admitted. Maybe I want to believe that history matters, that preserving beautiful things is worth the extra effort and expense. Maybe I need to believe that because if it's not true, then I've spent my entire career chasing something meaningless. The honesty surprised them both. Sophia felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with their business relationship and everything to do with the way Kieran was studying her face, as if memorizing every detail. It's not meaningless, he said quietly, but it's not enough by itself, either. Then help me make it enough. The words came out more breathless than she'd intended, charged with double meaning that neither of them could ignore. Help me find a way to honor the past while building the future. For a moment, the air between them crackled with tension that had nothing to do with architecture or development deals. Sophia could feel her pulse in her throat, could see the exact moment Kieran's gaze dropped to her mouth and lingered there. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment like glass. Kieran glanced at the screen, and something in his expression hardened. I have to take this. He stepped away from the table, his voice dropping to the kind of quiet authority Sophia had learned to associate with pack business, though she didn't understand why that phrase had occurred to her. While he was gone, Sophia tried to regain her equilibrium. This was supposed to be a professional meeting. She was supposed to be presenting architectural plans and cost analyses, not getting lost in storm-gray eyes and wondering what it would feel like if Kieran Blackthorne kissed her. She was still trying to convince herself that she hadn't been thinking about kissing when he returned to the table, his expression grim. Problem, she asked. You could say that. Kieran's jaw was tight with barely controlled tension. Someone's been asking questions about you. About your background, your previous projects, your reasons for being in Seattle. Ice formed in Sophia's stomach. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests someone wants to discredit you before our 30 days are up. His eyes were hard as granite now, all trace of earlier warmth gone. The kind that suggests someone sees you as enough of a threat to be worth investigating. Who would? Sophia began, then stopped as understanding dawned. A competing developer. Most likely. Kieran began gathering their materials with sharp, efficient movements. Someone who stands to benefit if our collaboration fails and the Harbor District project goes forward as originally planned. But we haven't even started working together yet. How could anyone see me as a threat? Kieran's smile was sharp as a blade. Because they've never seen me agree to work with opposition before. Because the fact that I'm willing to consider your proposals at all means you're either very persuasive or very dangerous. Which do you think I am? The question hung between them for a heartbeat before Kieran's expression shifted into something predatory and possessive that made her breath catch. Both, he said simply. Which means whoever's investigating you has no idea what they're dealing with. The way he said it, like a promise, like a threat, like a vow of protection, sent heat spiraling through Sophia's body. This was Kieran at his most dangerous, not the corporate shark or the charming market regular, but something altogether more primal. Something that recognized her as his to protect, whether she'd agreed to that designation or not. What do we do? She asked. We. Kieran's eyebrows rose slightly. We. Sophia repeated firmly. You said it yourself. Our collaboration is what has them worried. That makes this my problem too. For a moment, Kieran looked like he wanted to argue, like every instinct he possessed was telling him to shield her from whatever was coming. Then his expression shifted into something that might have been respect. "We work faster," he said. "We prove your concept before they can tear it down. And we watch each other's backs." Partners? Sophia extended her hand, the same gesture that had sealed their original agreement. This time when Kieran took her hand, his grip was possessive, protective, claiming, "Partners." But even as she shook on it, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to something far more dangerous than a business partnership. Something that felt suspiciously like putting her trust and her heart in the hands of an alpha wolf who was already looking at her like she belonged to him. Chapter 5. Sophia's phone was ringing when she stepped out of the shower the next morning, her hair still dripping wet and her robe barely tied. She grabbed it from the bathroom counter, expecting to see Kieran's name on the screen. They'd exchanged numbers after their Pike Place meeting, and he'd been texting her architectural questions until nearly midnight. Instead, she saw a number she didn't recognize with the Portland area code. "Hello? Sophia Rivers?" The voice was crisp, professional, female. Speaking. "This is Jennifer Walsh from the Portland Business Journal. I'm working on a story about architectural preservation consultants, and your name came up. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Warning bells went off in Sophia's head. She'd left Portland 6 months ago, and while her work there had been successful, it hadn't been the kind of high-profile project that would generate media interest half a year later. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "Can you tell me what specifically prompted this story? Who gave you my name?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss sources, but I understand you're currently working on a controversial project in Seattle. Something involving Blackthorne development." The warning bells became air raid sirens. "Ms. Walsh, I'm going to have to call you back." Sophia ended the call and immediately dialed Kieran's number. He answered on the first ring, which should have been her first clue that he'd been expecting trouble. "What's wrong?" His voice was sharp, alert. "How did you know something was wrong?" "Because it's barely 7 a.m. and you're calling me instead of texting." "What happened?" Sophia sank onto her bed, suddenly feeling very small in her oversized bathrobe. "A reporter from Portland just called. She's doing a story about preservation consultants and somehow knows about our collaboration." The silence that followed was long enough to make her check whether the call had dropped. When Kieran finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "What exactly did she say?" "Not much. She wouldn't name her source, but she called it a controversial project and specifically mentioned Blackthorne development. This isn't coincidence, is it?"
No.
"It's not." She could hear movement in the background, the sound of him getting dressed, preparing for battle. "Someone's trying to put pressure on you. Force you to back down from our partnership before it really begins." "By what, exactly?" "Suggesting I'm controversial?" "By digging into your past projects, looking for anything that can be twisted to make you look incompetent or unethical. By creating a media narrative that makes the City Planning Commission nervous about our collaboration." Sophia's stomach dropped. "My past projects were all successful." "I'm sure they were. But success can be spun as failure if you're creative enough with the facts." Kieran's voice had taken on the edge she recognized from their first meeting, the tone that suggested he was preparing to destroy someone.
"Get dressed."
"We're going to my office." "Why?" "Because if someone wants to play dirty, they picked the wrong opponents. And because my security team is better equipped to handle this kind of situation than your Victorian house." Security team. The casual way he mentioned it reminded Sophia that Kieran Blackthorne wasn't just a successful developer. He was the kind of man who needed professional protection. The kind of man who had enemies. "Kieran, maybe I should just withdraw from the project. If working with me is going to cause problems for you. Like hell." The words cracked through the phone with enough force to make her flinch. "Nobody runs Sophie Rivers out of my city. Not on my watch." "My city. My watch." The possessiveness in his tone sent heat spiraling through her despite the circumstances. This wasn't just about their business partnership anymore. This was personal. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said. "Make it 20. "And Sophia?" "Yes. Watch your back. If they're willing to call reporters, they might be willing to do more." The line went dead leaving Sophia staring at her phone and wondering what exactly she'd gotten herself into. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been architectural drawings and construction costs. Now she was apparently the target of some kind of corporate espionage campaign. She dressed quickly in dark jeans and a cream sweater, pulling her hair back in a ponytail and grabbing her laptop bag. As she headed for the door, her landline rang. The display showed another number she didn't recognize, this one with a local Seattle area code. Against her better judgment, she answered. Miss Rivers? This is Tom Bradley from KOMO News. I understand you're working with Kieran Blackthorne on a controversial development project. Sophia hung up without saying a word. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed her keys and headed for the garage. By the time she reached the downtown building that housed Blackthorne Development, 2 more reporters had called her cell phone. She ignored them both, but the messages they left made it clear that someone was feeding the media a very specific narrative. Ambitious out-of-town consultant manipulates powerful developer, threatens local housing project, puts her own interests above community needs. It was cleverly done, she had to admit. True enough to be believable, twisted enough to be damaging. The Blackthorne building was a gleaming tower of steel and glass that rose 45 stories above Seattle's business district. Sophia had expected corporate sterility, but the lobby was warm and welcoming, with local artwork and comfortable seating areas that invited lingering. Even in crisis mode, Kieran's attention to detail impressed her. She gave her name to the security desk, and within moments, a familiar figure emerged from the elevator bank. James Morrison, he said, extending his hand. We met at the city planning meeting. Mr. Blackthorne asked me to escort you up. Sophia shook his hand, noting the way his eyes scanned the lobby with professional alertness. Is this normal? The security measures? Let's just say Mr. Blackthorne takes threats to people under his protection very seriously. Under his protection. The phrase sent another jolt of heat through her, though she tried to ignore it. This was business, she reminded herself. Professional courtesy. Nothing more. The elevator whisked them to the top floor with silent efficiency. When the doors opened, Sophia found herself in a space that was nothing like the corporate offices she'd expected. The executive level of Blackthorne Development looked more like an upscale residence than a workplace. Warm wood floors, comfortable seating areas, floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased breathtaking views of the city and Puget Sound. Art that was clearly chosen for love rather than investment value. Books that looked like they'd actually been read. Impressive, isn't it? James said, noticing her reaction. Kieran believes that people do their best work in spaces that feel like home. Before Sophia could respond, a door at the far end of the room opened and Kieran strode out, followed by a woman in an elegant black suit who looked like she could kill someone with her briefcase. Sophia. Kieran reached her in 3 quick strides, his hands settling on her shoulders as his eyes searched her face. Are you all right? The concern in his voice, the protective way he positioned himself between her and the rest of the room, the gentle pressure of his hands, it was overwhelming and comforting and terrifying all at once. I'm fine, she managed. Rattled but fine. Good. His hands lingered for a moment longer before he stepped back, though he remained close enough to touch. This is Catherine Reed, head of our corporate security. She's going to brief us on what we're dealing with. Catherine was every inch the professional, from her perfectly styled dark hair to her no-nonsense expression. But when she looked at Sophia, there was something almost protective in her gaze. Someone's running a coordinated campaign against you, she said, without preamble. 4 different reporters have been contacted in the last 12 hours, all with the same basic story angle. Someone wants you painted as an outsider who's manipulating local politics for personal gain.
Who?
Kieran's voice was deadly quiet.
Still working on that.
But whoever it is, they have resources and connections. This isn't some amateur operation. Sophia sank into one of the comfortable chairs, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. What kind of resources? The kind that can generate media interest in a preservation consultant who's been in town less than a year. The kind that can coordinate simultaneous contact with multiple news outlets. The kind that suggests serious money and serious connections. Another developer, Kieran said. It wasn't a question. Most likely. Someone who stands to lose if your collaboration succeeds and the Harbor District project gets modified or delayed. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Someone saw Sophia's partnership with Kieran as enough of a threat to warrant a coordinated attack. Someone with the resources to wage corporate warfare. What do we do? Sophia asked. Catherine and Kieran exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes. We accelerate the timeline, Catherine said. Get your proposal finished and presented before they can do serious damage to your reputation. And we go on the offensive, Kieran added, his voice carrying the kind of quiet menace that made Sophia remember exactly why he was feared in corporate circles. If someone wants to play dirty, we'll show them what dirty really looks like. I don't want to destroy anyone's career, Sophia said quickly. I just want to save those buildings. And someone wants to destroy your career to stop you. Kieran moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the city below. In my experience, people who attack from the shadows aren't usually content with a single strike. They'll keep escalating until they get what they want. Which means... He turned back to face her, and the expression in his eyes was pure predator. Which means we end this quickly, decisively, and permanently. The way he said it sent a shiver down Sophia's spine that was equal parts fear and anticipation. This was Kieran at his most dangerous, the alpha wolf who'd built an empire and defended it against all comers. And right now, he was looking at her like she was something precious that needed protecting. I need to see those buildings again, she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. If we're accelerating the timeline, I need to make sure I haven't missed anything important. I'll take you, Kieran said immediately. You don't need to. I'm not letting you wander around alone when someone's targeting you. His voice brooked no argument. We're partners, remember? Partners watch each other's backs. Is that what partners do? The question came out more breathless than she'd intended, charged with the awareness that their partnership was becoming something much more personal and dangerous. Kieran's eyes darkened as he studied her face. Among other things, the promise in his voice made heat pool low in her belly. This was supposed to be about business, about architecture and development deals. But the way Kieran was looking at her, the way her body responded to his presence, the way she felt safe and reckless and alive all at once, this was about so much more than preserving buildings. Mr. Blackthorne, Catherine interrupted, her tone carefully neutral. I should mention that our surveillance picked up some unusual activity near Miss Rivers' house last night. Nothing definitive, but worth noting. Ice replaced the heat in Sophia's veins. What kind of activity? A vehicle parked across the street for several hours. No one got out, but they had a clear view of your front door. Kieran's expression went absolutely still, dangerous in the way of predators preparing to strike. How long? 3 to 4 hours. Left around midnight. That settles it, Kieran said, his voice carrying absolute finality. You're not going home alone. Not until we know who we're dealing with. I can't just hide. You're not hiding. You're being smart. He moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Someone is escalating from phone calls to physical surveillance. The next step could be direct confrontation, and I won't have you caught unprepared. The protective authority in his voice should have annoyed her. Should have triggered every independent instinct she possessed. Instead, it made her feel cherished, valued, safe in a way she'd never experienced before. What are you suggesting? Stay close to me. Let me provide security until we know what we're dealing with. His eyes searched hers. Let me protect you. The words hung between them, heavy with implications that went far beyond professional courtesy. This wasn't just about keeping a business partner safe. This was about something primal, possessive, claiming. And God help her, Sophia wanted to say yes. Okay, she whispered. Kieran's smile was fierce, triumphant, possessive. Good. Catherine, I want surveillance on Miss Rivers' house and a full background check on anyone who's shown interest in the Harbor District project in the last 6 months. Already in progress. James, clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Miss Rivers and I have buildings to inspect. As they prepared to leave, Sophia caught her reflection in one of the windows. She looked small, vulnerable, completely out of her depth. But she also looked determined, ready to fight for what mattered to her. And standing beside her reflection was Kieran's, tall and powerful and unmistakably protective. Together, they looked like a force to be reckoned with. Like partners in every sense of the word. Like something that could become much more dangerous than either of them had bargained for. Chapter 6. The Harbor District looked different when viewed through the lens of corporate warfare. What had seemed like a charming collection of historical buildings now felt exposed, vulnerable. Much like Sophia herself as she walked beside Kieran through the empty lot that would become a construction site if their collaboration failed. "Tell me what you see," Kieran said, his voice low and intimate despite the broad daylight surrounding them. He'd positioned himself slightly behind and to her left, close enough to touch, his presence a warm, solid barrier between her and the rest of the world. Sophia pulled out her tablet, grateful for something concrete to focus on besides the way his proximity made her pulse race. The Hartwell building is the obvious centerpiece. Look at those cornerstones, hand-carved limestone that you literally can't get anymore. And the window casements. She moved closer to the building's facade, running her fingers over the intricate stonework. Behind her, she could hear Kieran's footsteps, the soft sound of him following her every movement. "The craftsmanship is incredible," she continued, pulling up historical photos on her tablet. "But more than that, it's the story. This building was constructed by Norwegian immigrants who'd learned their trade building churches in the old country. They put cathedral-level detail into a commercial building because they believed their work was a form of prayer." Prayer. Kieran's voice was closer now, just over her shoulder. "Is that how you see it?" Sophia turned to find him standing barely a foot away, his gray eyes intense with something that might have been curiosity or might have been hunger. "How I see what?" "Your work. Preserving these buildings. Is it prayer for you?" The question was more personal than anything he'd asked her before, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with architecture, and everything to do with the way he was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth understanding completely. "Maybe," she admitted. "Maybe it's about believing that beautiful things deserve to survive. That the stories they tell matter enough to fight for." Kieran reached past her to touch the same stonework she'd been examining, his arm brushing against hers in a contact that felt deliberate, electric. "Show me the story." For the next hour, Sophia walked him through the building's history, the neighborhood's evolution, the way immigration patterns and economic changes had shaped the Harbor District over more than a century. Kieran listened with the kind of focused attention she'd learned to associate with his business meetings, asking sharp questions that proved he was absorbing every detail. But there was something else in the way he watched her, something that made her hyper-aware of every gesture, every movement. When she pointed to architectural details, his gaze lingered on her hands. When she explained historical context, his eyes tracked the animation in her face. When she bent to examine foundation stones, she could feel him studying the curve of her back, the way her jeans hugged her hips. It was the most professionally productive and personally distracting hour of her life. The residential conversion would work, Kieran said finally as they stood in what had once been the building's main retail space. "The bones are solid, the layout is flexible, with modern mechanical systems and some creative interior work." "You sound surprised." "I am surprised." He turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I came here expecting to prove you wrong. To show you why preservation is impractical, why sentiment can't compete with reality. And instead, I found out that you're not sentimental. You're visionary." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. "There's a difference." The compliment, delivered in that low, rough voice, hit her harder than it should have. This was Kieran acknowledging that she was right, that her ideas had merit, that she was worthy of respect as well as protection. It was also Kieran looking at her like he wanted to devour her. "We should look at the other buildings," Sophia managed, her voice not quite steady. "Should we?" The question was innocent enough, but the way he asked it, like he was challenging her, like he was perfectly content to stay exactly where they were, made heat pool low in her belly. "The timeline," she reminded him, and herself. Catherine said we need to move fast. Catherine said a lot of things. Kieran's hand came up to brush a strand of hair away from her face, the contact sending electricity straight to her core. She also said you're under my protection now. Do you know what that means? Sophia's mouth went dry. Professional security, among other things. His thumb traced along her cheekbone, the touch feather-light and absolutely devastating. It means no one gets to you without going through me first. It means I'm responsible for keeping you safe, keeping you whole, keeping you exactly where you belong. And where do I belong? The question slipped out before she could stop it, breathless and wanting and far too revealing. Kieran's smile was slow, predatory, completely male. That depends. Are you asking as my business partner, or are you asking as something else? The something else hung between them like a live wire, dangerous and tempting, and impossible to ignore. This was the moment, Sophia realized. The moment when their partnership officially became something more, something that would change everything between them. She could step back, make a joke, redirect their conversation to safe professional territory. She could pretend that the way he was looking at her didn't make her want to throw caution to the wind and find out what it would feel like to be claimed by Kieran Blackthorne. Instead, she stepped closer. What else could I be asking as? Kieran's eyes darkened, his pupils dilating as she moved into his space. As the woman who's been driving me crazy for the past week. As the woman who looks at me like she's not sure whether she wants to fight me or kiss me. As the woman who's making me question everything I thought I knew about dominance and partnership and control. His hands settled on her waist, warm and possessive and absolutely right. As the woman I'm starting to think might be mine.
Mine.
The word sent heat spiraling through her entire body, made her feel claimed and cherished and wild all at once. This was dangerous territory, the kind that led to complications and heartbreak, and the blurring of lines that should stay clear. This was also the most alive she'd felt in years. Yours, she whispered.
To protect. To provide for.
To pleasure. His voice had dropped to a growl that seemed to vibrate through her bones. To possess, if you'll let me. Before she could respond, before she could think through the implications of what he was offering, Kieran's phone buzzed with the harsh insistence of an emergency alert. He ignored it. It buzzed again, then again, the sound cutting through the intimacy of the moment like a knife. Answer it, Sophia said reluctantly, though every cell in her body was screaming in protest. Kieran's jaw clenched as he pulled out his phone, his eyes never leaving her face. This better be life or death, Catherine. Even from where she stood, Sophia could hear the urgency in Catherine's voice, though she couldn't make out the specific words. When? Kieran's voice had gone deadly quiet. How long ago? No, don't wait. I want every available unit there now. He ended the call and immediately began texting, his fingers flying over the screen with the efficient precision of someone coordinating a military operation. What's wrong? Sophia asked, though the tight set of his shoulders already told her she wasn't going to like the answer. Someone broke into your house. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? 45 minutes ago. A neighbor called it in, saw the front door standing open. Signs of forced entry. Kieran's eyes were hard as stone, dangerous in a way that made her remember exactly what kind of predator he was beneath the expensive suits and civilized manner. Catherine's team is on site now, but whoever it was is long gone. Did they take anything? That's what we're going to find out. Kieran's hand found the small of her back, protective and possessive. But first, we're getting you somewhere safe. I want to see my house. Absolutely not. The flat refusal, delivered in a tone that brooked no argument, should have triggered every independent instinct Sophia possessed. Instead, it made her feel protected, cherished, like she was precious enough to be worth defending. Kieran. No. He turned to face her fully, his hands settling on her shoulders with gentle but implacable authority. Someone has escalated from phone calls to breaking and entering. The next step could be direct confrontation, and I won't risk having you in the line of fire. But my things can be replaced. His thumbs brushed over her collarbones, soothing and claiming all at once. You can't be. The words, the touch, the absolute certainty in his voice. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and exactly what she needed to hear. For the first time since this whole situation began, Sophia felt truly safe. "Where?" she asked quietly. "My place. It's secure, private, and I can make sure nothing happens to you there." His place. The implications were clear, dangerous, thrilling. This wasn't just about security anymore. This was about Kieran staking a claim, bringing her into his territory, his sanctuary. This was about becoming his in ways that went far beyond business partnerships. "Okay," she whispered. Kieran's smile was fierce, triumphant, possessive. "Good. Catherine will handle the scene at your house. Our only job now is getting you somewhere safe." As they walked back toward his car, Sophia caught herself stealing glances at the man beside her. Somewhere in the last hour, Kieran had stopped being her business partner and become something much more dangerous and necessary. Her protector. Her defender. Possibly her undoing. But as he opened the passenger door of his Mercedes and helped her inside with the careful attention of someone handling something precious, Sophia found that she didn't care about the dangers. All she cared about was the way Kieran looked at her, like she was worth protecting, worth claiming, worth keeping. And the terrifying realization that she was beginning to want all three. Chapter 7. Kieran's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a converted warehouse in Pioneer Square, and it was nothing like what Sophia had expected. She'd imagined corporate sterility, masculine minimalism, the kind of space that screamed power and success without revealing anything personal about its owner. Instead, she found herself in what could only be described as a sanctuary: warm hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased breathtaking views of Elliott Bay. Books everywhere, art that had clearly been chosen for love rather than investment, comfortable furniture that invited lingering. It was a home, not just a residence. A place where someone actually lived, breathed, found peace. "This is beautiful," she said, setting down her hastily packed overnight bag near the entrance. "You sound surprised." Kieran moved through the space with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in his environment, but Sophia noticed the way his eyes tracked her every reaction, as if her opinion mattered more than he wanted to admit. "I expected something more." She gestured vaguely, searching for the right words. "Corporate? Intimidating? Soulless?" His smile was wry, self-aware. "Most people do. It's useful in business negotiations. Let them see what they expect to see while keeping what actually matters private." What actually matters? The phrase hung between them as Sophia took in the details that revealed the man behind the corporate legend. A worn leather chair positioned perfectly to catch the morning light, with a stack of well-read books on the side table. Family photos, not biological family, she suspected, but the chosen family he'd mentioned at Pike Place Market. A kitchen that was clearly used for actual cooking, not just reheating takeout. "Wine?" Kieran asked, already moving toward what appeared to be a well-stocked bar area. "You look like you could use it." "Please." Sophia sank into the leather chair, which was every bit as comfortable as it looked, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. This morning she'd been an architectural consultant working on a preservation project. Now she was apparently the target of corporate espionage. Someone had broken into her house, and she was sitting in the private sanctuary of the most dangerous man she'd ever met. A man who'd looked at her earlier, like he wanted to claim her in ways that had nothing to do with business partnerships. Kieran returned with 2 glasses of wine, something red and probably expensive, and settled on the couch across from her. Even in his own space, he radiated controlled power, but there was something different about him here. Something more relaxed, more authentically himself. "Catherine called while you were in the bathroom," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "They've finished processing your house. And whoever broke in was looking for something specific. They went through your home office, your computer, your files. Everything else was left untouched." Sophia felt cold despite the warmth of the wine. "Looking for what?" "Information about your background, your previous projects, anything that could be used to discredit you or undermine our collaboration." Kieran's jaw tightened. They were thorough, professional. This wasn't some random break-in. So, this is definitely connected to the media campaign. Without question. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his full attention focused on her with laser intensity. Sophia, I need you to understand something. This isn't going to stop with phone calls and break-ins. Whoever's behind this sees you as a serious threat to their interests. They're going to keep escalating until they get what they want. Which is?
You gone.
Our collaboration ended. The Harbor District project moving forward exactly as originally planned. The flat certainty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. What aren't you telling me? Kieran was quiet for a long moment, studying the wine in his glass with a kind of intense focus that suggested internal debate. When he finally looked up, his eyes held something that might have been regret. There are aspects of my business that go beyond conventional development projects, he said carefully. Connections, relationships, territories that involve more than just money and construction permits. Territories. The way he said the word made something primitive and instinctive stir in Sophia's chest, a recognition she couldn't explain. What kind of territories? The kind where crossing certain lines has consequences beyond lawsuits and bad publicity. His voice had dropped to that low, dangerous register that made her pulse quicken. The kind where protection means something different than hiring security consultants. Sophia set down her wine glass, her hands not entirely steady. You're talking about something illegal. I'm talking about something older than law. Something that governs how power really works in this city. Kieran rose from the couch and moved to the windows, hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the darkening sky. I'm talking about the reason I've never lost a territorial dispute and why anyone smart enough to research me knows better than to push too hard. The words should have frightened her, should have sent her running for the door, demanding to be taken somewhere safer, somewhere normal, somewhere that didn't involve mysterious territorial disputes and veiled threats. Instead, they sent heat pooling in her belly and made her want to understand exactly what kind of man Kieran Blackthorne really was beneath the expensive suits and civilized veneer. Are you trying to scare me? She asked. I'm trying to be honest with you. He turned back to face her, and the expression in his eyes was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to by staying under my protection. And what am I agreeing to? Kieran moved toward her with a fluid grace she'd learned to associate with barely leashed power. When he reached her chair, he braced his hands on the armrests, caging her in without quite touching, his face inches from hers. You're agreeing to let me keep you safe by any means necessary, he said quietly. You're agreeing to trust me to handle threats in ways that might not always be conventional or illegal. You're agreeing to become part of my world, not just my business. His world. The phrase resonated through her in ways that had nothing to do with corporate partnerships and everything to do with the way he was looking at her, like she was something precious, something worth protecting, something that belonged with him. And if I can't agree to that, then I'll have James take you to a hotel, assign you a security detail, and handle this situation from a distance while keeping you as safe as I can through conventional means. The offer was reasonable, professional, exactly what she should want. It was also delivered in a tone that suggested it would break something in him if she chose it. But you don't want me to choose that option, she said.
No.
The single word was rough, honest, completely unguarded. I want you here, where I can protect you properly. Where I can make sure nothing happens to you. Where I can. Where you can what? Kieran's eyes darkened, his gaze dropping to her mouth before snapping back up. Where I can stop pretending that this is just about business. Where I can stop pretending that I don't want you in ways that have nothing to do with architectural preservation and everything to do with the way you make me feel when you look at me like I'm worth trusting. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and completely devastating. This wasn't just about protection anymore. This was about want, need, the kind of claiming that went soul deep. How do I make you feel? Sophia whispered. Like I've been waiting my entire life for you to walk into it. His voice was barely above a growl, rough with emotion and desire. Like every territorial instinct I possess recognizes you as mine before my brain can catch up. Like I'd burn down half of Seattle before I'd let anyone hurt you. The words should have been terrifying in their intensity, their possessiveness, their absolute certainty. Instead, they made Sophia feel cherished, claimed, safe in ways she'd never experienced before. "Kieran, I know it's too much, too fast," he said quickly. "I know you came here for protection, not for whatever this is between us. I know you have every right to ask me to keep things professional. What if I don't want to keep things professional?" The question stopped him mid-sentence, his entire body going still as he stared at her. "What?" Sophia reached up to touch his face, her palm settling against his cheek as she felt him lean into the contact like a man dying of thirst offered water. "What if I want to know what it feels like to be claimed by you? What if I want to understand what you mean when you say I'm yours? What if I'm tired of pretending that I don't feel something dangerous and electric every time you look at me?" Kieran's control, so carefully maintained for the past week, finally snapped. His mouth crashed down on hers with the hunger of a man who'd been starving, all heat and possession and desperate need. Sophia melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor, equal need, equal desperation. This wasn't gentle or tentative or careful. This was claiming, pure and simple, Kieran marking her as is while she surrendered to the fire that had been building between them since their first meeting. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with barely leashed control. "Because once I claim you properly, there's no going back. Once you're mine completely." The possessiveness in his voice, the absolute certainty, the promise of total claiming, it should have sent her running. Instead, it made her feel more desired, more wanted, more cherished than she'd ever felt in her life. "I'm sure," she whispered against his lips. "I'm yours." Kieran's smile was fierce, triumphant, completely male. "Mine," he agreed, and kissed her again with the passion of a man claiming his mate. Outside, Seattle glittered in the darkness, unaware that the balance of power in the Harbor District conflict had just shifted irrevocably. Inside, Sophia Rivers discovered exactly what it felt like to be claimed by an alpha wolf who'd finally found his perfect match, and decided she never wanted to be anywhere else. Chapter 8. Sophia woke to the scent of coffee and something that smelled like heaven, bacon, eggs, and what might have been fresh bread. For a moment, she lay still in the unfamiliar bed, trying to orient herself. Silk sheets, impossibly soft. Morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The distant sounds of a city waking up far below. Kieran's penthouse. Kieran's bed. Memory flooded back in a rush of heat and sensation. The way he'd kissed her. The way she'd surrendered to his claiming. The way they'd moved together with a desperate hunger that spoke of recognition, of finding something they hadn't even known they were searching for. The way he'd whispered her name against her skin like a prayer, like a promise, like a vow. She sat up, pushing her hair out of her face, and found herself alone in the massive bed. The sheets beside her were rumpled but cool, suggesting Kieran had been up for a while. A silk robe lay across the foot of the bed, his, judging by the size, but clearly placed there for her use. Sophia slipped into the robe, which fell to her knees and smelled like him, and padded barefoot toward the source of those incredible cooking smells. She found Kieran in the kitchen, moving with the same fluid efficiency he brought to everything else. He'd changed into dark jeans and a gray Henley that clung to his shoulders in ways that made her mouth go dry. His hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd run his hands through it, and there was something almost domestic about the scene that made her heart do strange things in her chest. "Good morning," he said without turning around, though she was certain she'd made no sound. "Coffee's fresh. Breakfast will be ready in 5 minutes. You cook." It wasn't a question, but it came out sounding like one. "I cook." Kieran glanced over his shoulder, and the heat in his eyes as he took in her appearance, barefoot, disheveled, wearing his robe, was enough to make her pulse quicken. "I also bake, do laundry, and manage a household. Foster care teaches you to be self-sufficient." The casual mention of his childhood made something twist in Sophia's chest. She moved closer, drawn by the easy intimacy of the moment and the way he seemed to fill the kitchen with his presence. What else did foster care teach you? To recognize what's worth protecting. He turned to face her fully, and the expression in his eyes was so intense, so possessive, that she felt claimed all over again. To hold on to the good things when you find them. To fight for what's yours. Yours. The words sent heat spiraling through her, a reminder of everything that had changed between them in the space of a single night. Is that what I am? Yours? Kieran moved toward her with predatory grace, not stopping until she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. After last night? After the way you said my name when I was inside you? After the way you marked me with your nails and your teeth and your perfect surrender? His voice dropped to a growl that seemed to vibrate through her bones.
Yes.
You're mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have triggered every independent instinct she possessed. Instead, it made her feel cherished, protected, claimed in the most fundamental way possible. Good, she whispered, and saw his pupils dilate with renewed hunger. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. They both ignored it. It buzzed again, then again, the insistent sound cutting through the intimate moment like a blade. Answer it, Sophia said reluctantly. Kieran's jaw clenched as he reached for the phone, his eyes never leaving her face. This better be important, James. Even from where she stood, Sophia could hear the urgency in James's voice, though she couldn't make out specific words. When? Kieran's voice had gone deadly quiet. How many outlets? Send me everything. He ended the call and immediately began scrolling through his phone, his expression growing darker with each passing second. What's wrong? Sophia asked, though his body language already told her she wasn't going to like the answer. The media campaign has escalated. Kieran's voice was controlled, professional, but she could see the rage simmering beneath the surface. 3 different news outlets are running stories about you this morning. Same basic angle, but more detailed. More personal. Ice formed in Sophia's stomach. What kind of personal? Kieran hesitated, and that hesitation told her everything she needed to know about how bad this was going to be. Show me. Sophia. Show me. He turned his phone toward her, and the headline made her legs go weak. Auto F-Town consultant with troubled past manipulates local developer. The article that followed was a masterpiece of character assassination disguised as journalism. It detailed her previous projects, but twisted every success into failure, every professional decision into evidence of incompetence or ulterior motives. It mentioned her tendency to move frequently, painting her as someone who swept into communities, caused chaos, and disappeared before dealing with the consequences. Worst of all, it dug into her personal life with the kind of invasive detail that made her feel violated all over again. Her college years, her early career struggles, even a brief relationship that had ended badly. All of it presented as evidence that she was unstable, unreliable, unworthy of trust. It's all lies, she whispered. It's all truth, carefully selected and maliciously presented. Kieran's voice was gentle, but his eyes were furious. Whoever's doing this has access to serious resources, private investigators, media connections, the kind of money that can buy comprehensive background reports. Sophia sank onto one of the kitchen stools, feeling suddenly small and exposed. They're going to destroy me. No. The single word cracked through the kitchen with absolute finality. They're not. Kieran, this is 3 major news outlets. By the end of the day, it'll be everywhere. The City Planning Commission will see this. The Community Board. Everyone we need to convince will think you're exactly what someone wants them to think. Kieran moved to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders with possessive gentleness. But here's what they don't understand. I don't give a damn what anyone thinks about my business decisions. I don't care if the entire city thinks you're the devil herself. You're mine now, which means attacking you is attacking me. And I've built this empire by making sure everyone knows the consequences of that mistake. The protective fury in his voice sent heat spiraling through her despite the circumstances. This was Kieran at his most dangerous, the alpha wolf whose territory had been invaded, whose mate had been threatened. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment the first reporter called. His hands tightened on her shoulders, claiming and protective. I'm going to war. The way he said it, casual, certain, absolutely without doubt, made Sophia remember that Kieran Blackthorne hadn't built his empire through playing nice. He'd built it by being more ruthless, more strategic, more dangerous than anyone who dared to challenge him. I don't want you to destroy anyone's career because of me. Then you shouldn't have let them make it personal. His reflection met her eyes in the kitchen window, and what she saw there was pure predator. The moment they broke into your house, this stopped being about business. The moment they attacked your reputation, it became about honor. The moment they made you feel unsafe in my city, it became about territory.
Territory.
There was that word again, loaded with implications she was beginning to understand had nothing to do with conventional business practices. Your city, my territory, my woman. His voice dropped to a growl that seemed to vibrate through her entire body. And I protect what's mine. Before Sophia could respond, the kitchen filled with the sound of multiple phones buzzing simultaneously. Kieran's personal phone, his business phone, even what appeared to be a third device she hadn't noticed before. Popular morning, she said weakly. Kieran glanced at the screens, his expression shifting from protective fury to something that looked almost like anticipation. James, Catherine, and my media relations team. They've seen the articles. And they're about to learn why crossing Kieran Blackthorne is the kind of mistake you only make once. He answered the first call, his voice shifting into the tone of absolute authority she recognized from their first meeting.
James.
Conference call with Catherine and the media team in 10 minutes. I want a full strategic response plan, complete background checks on every reporter who ran these stories, and a comprehensive investigation into who's funding this campaign. Price is no object, timeline is immediate, and I want options that range from civilized to scorched earth. The conversation continued for several minutes, Kieran issuing orders with the precision of a general commanding troops. Sophia listened, fascinated despite her anxiety, as he orchestrated what was clearly going to be a massive counteroffensive. When he finally ended the call, he turned to find her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Second thoughts? He asked quietly.
About what?
About being claimed by someone who handles problems the way I handle problems. About being part of a world where business disputes can turn into full-scale wars. Sophia studied his face, seeing the man who'd cooked her breakfast and the apex predator who'd just declared war in the space of a single morning. Both were equally real, equally him, equally dangerous in their own ways. Are you asking if I'm afraid of you? I'm asking if you should be. The honest uncertainty in his voice, the vulnerability beneath the controlled power, made her heart ache. This was Kieran giving her the chance to walk away, to choose safety over whatever this was between them. Sophia rose from the stool and moved into his space, her hands settling on his chest as she looked up into those storm-gray eyes. I'm not afraid of you, she said firmly. I'm afraid for anyone stupid enough to come after what's yours. Kieran's smile was fierce, triumphant, completely devastating. That's my girl. Before she could respond, he kissed her with the hunger of a man reclaiming what belonged to him. All heat and possession and barely leashed power. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. This is about to get ugly, he warned. Then it's a good thing I like dangerous men, Sophia replied. Kieran's laugh was low, pleased, predatory. You're going to fit into my world perfectly. As they prepared for what was clearly going to be a day of strategic warfare, Sophia found herself looking forward to watching Kieran Blackthorne remind Seattle exactly why crossing him was a mistake, and to discovering just how dangerous it could be to be claimed by an alpha wolf who'd finally found his perfect mate. Chapter 9. The war room at Blackthorne Development looked like something out of a military operation. 3 massive screens displayed news feeds, social media analytics, and what appeared to be a comprehensive network analysis showing connections between media outlets, funding, sources, and key players in Seattle's development community. Catherine Reed stood at the center of it all like a general commanding her troops, while James Morrison coordinated with what seemed like an army of researchers, lawyers, and media specialists. Sophia had never seen anything like it. "The coordinated timing confirms our suspicions," Catherine was saying as Kieran and Sophia entered the conference room. All 3 stories were released within a 40-minute window, with identical talking points and similar source material. "This isn't journalism, it's warfare." Kieran moved to the head of the table with the fluid confidence of someone who belonged there, Sophia beside him. She noticed the way every person in the room automatically deferred to his presence, the subtle shift in body language that acknowledged him as the unquestioned authority. "What do we have?"
Kieran asked.
"More than they expected us to find," James replied with something that might have been satisfaction. "The private investigator who compiled the background research on Miss Rivers is Harold Vance, formerly of Vance and Associates. He's worked exclusively for Meridian Development Group for the past 18 months. "Meridian?" Kieran's voice went deadly quiet. "Richard Pemberton's company." The name clicked for Sophia, the nervous man from that first board meeting, the one who'd looked ready to crawl under the table when Kieran had questioned him about the Harbor District project. "It gets better," Catherine added. "Meridian has been quietly acquiring property adjacent to the Harbor District for the past year. If your project gets delayed or modified, they're positioned to make a competing bid for the entire development zone." The picture was becoming clear, and it was uglier than Sophia had imagined. This wasn't just about stopping her preservation proposal. It was about eliminating competition for one of the most valuable development opportunities in Seattle. "How much property?"
Kieran asked.
"Enough to make our project irrelevant if they can force us out." James pulled up a map showing property ownership in the Harbor District. "They've been using shell companies, different law firms, paying premium prices to avoid drawing attention. They've been planning this for months," Sophia said quietly, the implications hitting her. "The media campaign, the break-in, even the community pushback, it was all designed to create chaos around our collaboration. To make you look incompetent and me look like I'm making poor business decisions based on sentiment rather than strategy," Kieran agreed. "Classic corporate warfare tactics." "So, what do we do about it?" Sophia asked. The smile that spread across Kieran's face was predatory, dangerous, and completely without mercy. "We remind Richard Pemberton why I own this city, and he doesn't." For the next 2 hours, Sophia watched Kieran orchestrate what could only be described as a masterpiece of strategic destruction. It was like watching a chess grandmaster play against amateurs, every move calculated, every decision designed to achieve maximum impact with surgical precision. First, the counterattack on the media front. Catherine's team had compiled comprehensive dossiers on all 3 reporters who'd run the hit pieces, including their relationships with Meridian, their previous work, and what appeared to be evidence of journalistic misconduct in other cases. "I want these delivered to their editors within the hour," Kieran said, reviewing the files with cold efficiency, along with a formal complaint about ethics violations and a request for retractions. "And if they refuse?" James asked. "They won't. Not when they see what we have on their reporters' previous fabrications and the money trail connecting them to Meridian." Next, the business warfare. Kieran's team had uncovered Meridian's financing structure for their Harbor District acquisitions, including some creative accounting that skirted the edges of SEC regulations. "Thomas," Kieran addressed one of his lawyers, "I want a formal complaint filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding Meridian's disclosure violations. I want their financing tied up in regulatory review for the next 6 months. Consider it done. And their shell company acquisitions? Technically legal, but we can challenge the zoning applications for any development that uses properties acquired through deceptive practices. Tie them up in city planning review indefinitely." It was ruthless, comprehensive, and absolutely devastating. Sophia watched Richard Pemberton's company being systematically dismantled with the kind of precision that spoke to years of experience in corporate warfare. But Kieran wasn't finished. "Personal consequences," he said quietly, and something in his tone made the entire room go still. "Richard Pemberton authorized an attack on someone under my protection. That requires a more direct response." "Kieran," Sophia said carefully, "what kind of direct response?" He turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that was older than law, deeper than civilization, more dangerous than anything she'd encountered in the corporate world. The kind that ensures he never makes this mistake again. Before Sophia could ask what that meant, Kieran's personal phone rang. He glanced at the screen and something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Everyone out," he said quietly.
Now.
The room emptied with the efficiency of people accustomed to following orders without question. Within moments, only Kieran and Sophia remained. Kieran answered the phone on the final ring. Richard. Even from across the table, Sophia could hear the panic in Richard Pemberton's voice, though she couldn't make out the specific words. "You should have thought about consequences before you authorized breaking into my mate's house," Kieran said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that could topple governments. "Before you attacked her reputation. Before you made the mistake of thinking I wouldn't find out who was behind it." More frantic talking from the other end of the line. "I don't negotiate with people who threaten what's mine," Kieran continued. "I eliminate them." The conversation continued for several more minutes, Kieran's side consisting mostly of monosyllabic responses and statements that sounded more like pronouncements of fate than business negotiations. When he finally ended the call, his expression was satisfied, predatory, final. "What just happened?" Sophia asked. Richard Pemberton just learned that crossing me has consequences beyond anything he imagined. Kieran moved around the table to stand behind her chair, his hands settling on her shoulders with possessive gentleness. "Meridian Development is withdrawing from the Harbor District entirely. They're issuing public apologies for the media campaign and retractions of all the stories. Richard is personally calling each outlet to explain that the information was fabricated." "How did you?" Sophia began, then stopped. "What did you threaten him with?" "I didn't threaten him with anything. I simply explained the reality of his situation." "Which is?" Kieran's smile was sharp as a blade. "That I know where his children go to school, where his wife gets her hair done, which country club he plays golf at every Saturday morning. That I know about his cocaine habit, his gambling debts, and the creative accounting that's been keeping Meridian solvent for the past 3 years." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. "You investigated his family?" "I investigated everything about Richard Pemberton the moment he became a threat to you." Kieran's voice was matter-of-fact, as if comprehensive surveillance of business rivals was the most natural thing in the world. "I know his weaknesses, his secrets, his pressure points. I know exactly how much force is required to make him understand that some mistakes can't be undone. And if he hadn't backed down, then he would have discovered that I don't make empty threats." Kieran's hands tightened slightly on her shoulders, protective and possessive. "I protect what's mine, Sophia. By whatever means necessary." The words should have frightened her. Should have made her question what kind of man she'd aligned herself with, what kind of world she'd entered by accepting his protection and his claiming. Instead, they made her feel safer than she'd ever felt in her life. "It's over?" she asked. "The immediate threat, yes. But there will be others." Kieran moved around her chair to face her directly. "Being with me, being mine, it means you'll always be a target for people who want to hurt me through you. It means living in a world where business disputes can turn deadly, where protection requires resources most people can't imagine. Are you trying to give me an out?" "I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're choosing." His eyes were intense, vulnerable, completely honest. "Because once we move forward from here, once we announce our partnership and our relationship publicly, there's no going back to your quiet life restoring buildings in small cities." Sophia studied his face, seeing the man who just destroyed a competitor with surgical precision and the man who was offering her the chance to walk away to protect her from the consequences of his world. "What if I don't want to go back to quiet? Then you'll fit perfectly into the world I'm building." Kieran's smile was fierce, triumphant, possessive. "The world we'll build together." "Together? You don't think I went through all this trouble just to have you work on one preservation project, do you?" His voice dropped to that low, rough register that made her pulse quicken. "You're mine now, Sophia. That means your talents, your vision, your passion for preserving beautiful things. All of it belongs to me now. All of it becomes part of what we create together." The possessiveness in his tone should have triggered every independent instinct she possessed. Instead, it made her feel claimed, cherished, valued in ways she'd never experienced before. What are you proposing? A permanent partnership. Professional and personal. You handle the historical preservation and architectural vision for all my projects. I handle the business, the politics, the protection. His eyes burned with intensity and promise. We build something together that's bigger than either of us could create alone. It was everything she'd never dared to dream of: unlimited resources, complete creative freedom, the backing of one of the most powerful men in the Pacific Northwest. It was also binding herself permanently to a man whose world operated by rules she was only beginning to understand. And personally? Kieran's smile was slow, predatory, completely devastating. Personally, you're already mine. The only question is whether you're ready to make it official. Official how? However you want. Marriage, mating bond, a collar with my name on it. I don't care about the form as long as the substance is clear. His voice roughened with emotion and desire. You belong to me, I belong to you, and anyone who threatens that arrangement learns why crossing an alpha is the kind of mistake you don't survive. The words hung between them, dangerous and tempting and absolutely final. This was Kieran offering her everything: his world, his protection, his complete claiming, his heart. All she had to do was say yes. Yes, Sophia whispered. Kieran's triumph was fierce, possessive, completely male. Mine, he said, and kissed her with the passion of a man claiming his mate for all eternity. Outside, Seattle continued its daily rhythm, unaware that the balance of power in the development world had just shifted irrevocably. Inside, two people discovered that sometimes the most dangerous partnerships are the ones that feel like destiny. Chapter 10. 3 weeks later, Sophia stood in the construction trailer that served as the on-site office for the Harbor District project, watching through the windows as crews carefully dismantled the temporary supports around the Hartwell building's restored facade. The October afternoon sun caught the limestone carvings, making them glow like jewels against the backdrop of Seattle's skyline. It was working. Their hybrid approach was actually working. The residential units on the 3rd floor will be ready for final inspection next week, James said, looking up from the project timeline spreadsheet they'd been reviewing. Pre-sales are at 93%, and we have a waiting list for the remaining units. The retail spaces? Fully leased. The restaurant group that's taking the corner space on the ground floor is particularly excited about the original tin ceiling and exposed brick walls. Sophia smiled, feeling a satisfaction that went deeper than professional success. This project had become something more than architecture or development. It was proof that preservation and progress could coexist, that honoring the past while building the future wasn't just possible but profitable. Mr. Blackthorne asked me to give you this, James said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. He said to tell you it was time. The envelope was heavy, expensive, with her name written across the front in Kieran's bold handwriting. Inside, she found a key, old brass, ornately carved, clearly historical, and a note in the same decisive script. The deed is in your name. Consider it a professional tool and a personal promise.
K.
James, Sophia said carefully. What building does this key open? His smile was knowing, indulgent. The Meridian building on First Avenue. The 1906 structure that's been vacant for the past 5 years? Mr. Blackthorne acquired it yesterday. He thought you might have some ideas for adaptive reuse. Sophia stared at the key, understanding flooding through her. The Meridian building was one of Seattle's most beautiful and neglected historical structures, a 7-story masterpiece of early 20th century commercial architecture that had been slowly deteriorating while various developers argued over its fate. And Kieran had bought it for her. Not just for her to work on, but for her to own. Her name on the deed, her project, her vision. How much did it cost? She asked weakly. I believe the phrase Mr. Blackthorne used was irrelevant. He said to tell you that alphas provide for their mates, and that you'd understand what he meant.
Provide.
The word sent heat spiraling through her, a reminder of everything that had changed between them over the past 3 weeks. The way he'd moved her permanently into his penthouse with a possessiveness that brooked no argument. The way he'd introduced her to his world, not just the business empire, but the network of relationships and loyalties that ran deeper than conventional corporate structures. The way he'd claimed her, completely and irrevocably, in ways that left no doubt about who she belonged to. Where is he now? Sophia asked. Final walkthrough of the Hartwell building with the city inspectors. He should be back shortly. Sophia pocketed the key and walked to the window, watching the construction crews work with a kind of careful precision that came from understanding they were handling something precious. This project had transformed from a battleground into a partnership, from conflict into collaboration. Much like her relationship with the man who'd made it all possible, Miss Rivers. She turned to find Catherine Reed in the doorway of the trailer, looking as professionally composed as ever despite the construction site chaos surrounding them. Catherine, is everything all right? More than all right. I thought you'd want to know. The Seattle Business Journal is running a feature story about the Harbor District project next week. They're calling it a model for how preservation and development can work together. There's also interest from Architectural Digest and Preservation magazine. That's wonderful. It is. But there's something else. Catherine stepped fully into the trailer, her expression shifting into something more personal, more protective. I've been handling Kieran's security for 8 years, Miss Rivers. I've seen him with business partners, with casual relationships, with people who thought they could manipulate or use him. Sophia waited, sensing this conversation was heading somewhere important. I've never seen him with someone who made him better, Catherine continued. Someone who brought out the best in him while making him more himself, not less. Someone who could match him without trying to change him. Catherine. He's planning something, Catherine said quietly. Something that involves you, permanently. I thought you should know that whatever he's planning, it comes from a place of wanting to give you the world, not control it. Before Sophia could ask what that meant, the trailer door opened and Kieran stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of autumn air and construction dust and that indefinable something that was purely him. Ladies, he said, his voice warm with satisfaction and something that might have been anticipation. Perfect timing. Catherine excused herself with a knowing look, leaving Sophia alone with the man who'd transformed her life in ways she was still discovering. James said you have a gift for me, Sophia said, pulling the key from her pocket. I have several gifts for you. Kieran moved toward her with that fluid grace she'd learned to associate with barely contained power. The building is just the first one. Just the first. I told you, alphas provide for their mates. His hand settled on her waist, possessive and gentle. Did you think I was going to stop at one building? Kieran, you can't just buy me a building every time you want to make a point. I can do whatever I want with my resources. And right now, what I want is to give you the tools to build the career you've always dreamed of. The freedom to choose projects based on passion instead of practicality. The security to take risks because you know you have someone who will always catch you if you fall. The words were delivered matter-of-factly, as if reshaping someone's entire professional life was the most natural thing in the world. Which, for Kieran, it probably was. What's the second gift? Sophia asked, because she could see in his eyes that there was more coming. Kieran's smile was slow, predatory, completely devastating. Dinner with my family tonight. Your family? Sophia felt her pulse quicken. You mean the pack? I mean the people who matter most to me in the world. The ones who've been asking when they get to meet the woman who's turned their alpha into someone who smiles at his phone and hums while he works. The thought of meeting the people who'd helped shape Kieran into the man he was both terrified and thrilled her. This felt significant, official, like another step towards something permanent and irrevocable. Are you nervous? Kieran asked, apparently reading her expression with ease. Should I be? They're going to love you. His voice carried absolute certainty. They're going to see what I see, that you make me better, stronger, happier. That you're not trying to change me or tame me, just partner with me. Partner. The word resonated through her with rightness, with truth. That's what they'd become, wasn't it? Not owner and owned, not dominant and submissive, but partners in the truest sense. And the third gift? She asked, because she could see in his eyes that there was still more. Kieran's smile turned wicked, heated, full of promise. That one comes later tonight, after dinner, when we're alone, and I can show you properly how much I appreciate having you in my life." The heat in his voice, the promise of claiming and pleasure and complete possession, sent fire racing through her veins. Even after 3 weeks of nights that left her boneless and breathless and completely satisfied, Kieran could still make her want with just a look, just a word, just the promise of his hands on her body. "How much later?" she asked, moving closer until they were sharing the same air. "Behave," Kieran murmured against her ear, his voice rough with restraint. "We have inspectors walking through the site, and I won't have you distracting me from making sure everything is perfect." "Everything already is perfect." "Is it?" He pulled back to study her face, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Because I have one more gift. The most important one. Kieran, marry me." The words were simple, direct, completely without ceremony. No elaborate proposal, no ring, no getting down on one knee. Just Kieran Blackthorne, in a construction trailer surrounded by the project that had brought them together, asking her to make their partnership permanent in every way possible. "Marry you," Sophia repeated, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Marry me. Be my wife, my mate, my partner in everything. Let me give you my name and my protection and my complete devotion for the rest of our lives." "You're serious." "I've never been more serious about anything." His hands cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "I love you, Sophia Rivers. I love your passion, your vision, your stubborn refusal to back down from what matters to you. I love the way you challenge me, the way you make me want to be worthy of you. I love that you see the man beneath the alpha and choose both." The confession hung between them, raw and honest and completely without defenses. This was Kieran at his most vulnerable, offering her everything he was and everything he had. "I love you too," she whispered, and saw his eyes close as if her words were a benediction. "Yes. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your wife and your mate and your partner. Yes to all of it." Kieran's kiss was fierce, triumphant, completely possessive. It was the kiss of a man who'd found his perfect match and had no intention of ever letting her go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Mine," he said simply. "Yours," Sophia agreed. "Always." Outside, the construction crews continued their work, building something beautiful from the bones of the past and the vision of the future. Inside the trailer, two people had just agreed to build something even more beautiful, a life together that honored what they'd been separately while creating something entirely new. Something that would last forever. Chapter 11. The restaurant Kieran had chosen for dinner was a small, intimate place in Pioneer Square that felt more like someone's living room than a commercial establishment. Sophia could see why he'd picked it: the exposed brick walls, the warm lighting, the way conversations seemed to flow naturally around the closely spaced tables. It was the kind of place where important conversations happened, where bonds were forged and tested, where families met the people who mattered. "They're going to interrogate you," Kieran warned as they approached the private dining room he'd reserved. "Not maliciously, but thoroughly. They take their responsibility to me seriously, which means they take their responsibility to evaluate you seriously." "Should I be prepared for specific questions?" "They're going to want to know that you're not using me, that you're not going to hurt me, and that you understand what it means to be part of our family." His hand found the small of her back, protective and possessive. "They're also going to want to know that you can handle yourself in situations that go beyond normal business or social interactions." Before Sophia could ask what that meant, Kieran opened the door to the private dining room, and she found herself face to face with the people who'd helped shape the man she was going to marry. They were not what she'd expected. James Morrison she knew, of course, and Catherine Reed was already rising from her seat with something that might have been approval in her professional expression. But the other 4 people in the room radiated the kind of quiet power that had nothing to do with business suits or corporate titles. "Everyone," Kieran said, his voice carrying the familiar note of authority that made people pay attention. "I'd like you to meet Sophia Rivers. Sophia, these are the people who matter most to me in the world." The introductions were formal but warm. Marcus Jun, who owned a chain of restaurants throughout the Pacific Northwest and whose handshake conveyed strength without aggression. Elena Vasquez, an attorney whose sharp eyes missed nothing and whose smile was genuine when it came. David Kim, a soft-spoken man who apparently ran some kind of security consulting firm and who seemed to catalog every detail of Sophia's appearance and behavior. And Sarah Mitchell, a veterinarian whose motherly warmth was immediately apparent despite the way she studied Sophia with professional thoroughness. "So you're the woman who's managed to domesticate our Alpha," Marcus said with a grin that took any sting out of the words. "I don't think anyone could domesticate Kieran," Sophia replied. "Nor would I want to. I fell in love with him exactly as he is." "Smart answer," Elena murmured approvingly. As the evening progressed, Sophia began to understand that this wasn't just a social gathering. It was an evaluation, a test, a way for the people who loved Kieran to determine whether she was worthy of their trust and acceptance. They asked questions about her background, her intentions, her understanding of Kieran's world. Not unkindly, but with the thoroughness of people who'd seen their leader hurt before and were determined not to let it happen again. "You have to understand," Sarah said during a lull in the conversation, her voice gentle but serious. "We've all been through difficult times together. We've built something special here, something worth protecting. Kieran is the heart of what we've created, and his happiness, his safety, his well-being, they matter to all of us." "I understand," Sophia said. "And I hope you can see that they matter to me too." "We can see that," David said quietly. "The question is whether you can handle the responsibilities that come with mattering to him." "What kind of responsibilities?" The question hung in the air for a moment before Catherine leaned forward, her expression shifting into something more serious. "There are aspects of Kieran's business that operate outside conventional corporate structures," she said carefully. "Relationships and loyalties that go deeper than money or contracts. When you become his mate officially, you don't just become his wife. You become part of a community that sometimes has to handle problems in ways that courts and lawyers can't address." "Are you talking about something illegal?" "We're talking about something older than law," Marcus said, echoing words Kieran had used weeks ago. "Something that governs how real power works when official channels fail." Before Sophia could respond, Kieran's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. The entire table went silent as he answered. "What?" His voice had gone deadly quiet, and Sophia felt every person in the room shift into high alert.
"When?"
"How many?" "No, don't engage until I get there." He ended the call and looked around the table, his expression grim. "Problem?" James asked. Richard Pemberton apparently didn't learn his lesson the first time. Kieran's voice carried the kind of controlled fury that made Sophia remember exactly how dangerous he could be. "He's at the Harbor District site with a crew of men, claiming there were irregularities in the permit process and demanding access to conduct an independent safety inspection. At 9 p.m. on a Friday night?" Elena's voice was sharp with disbelief. "He's looking for something he can use to shut us down," Catherine said. "Some violation, some excuse to claim the project is unsafe and needs to be halted pending further review. Or he's looking to sabotage something," David added grimly. "Make sure there are actual safety violations to find." Kieran was already standing, his body language shifting into something that was purely predatory. "James, call our security team and have them meet us at the site. Catherine, contact our legal team and have them standing by. Everyone else is coming with you," Marcus interrupted. "You don't face this alone. This isn't your fight." "It became our fight the moment someone threatened what matters to you," Sarah said firmly. "That's what family means." Sophia watched the exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just about business relationships or professional loyalty. This was about something deeper, more primal, more binding than conventional friendships. This was about Pac. "What do you need me to do?" she asked quietly. Every person at the table turned to look at her, and she could see the moment when their evaluation shifted into something like respect. "You don't have to," Kieran began. "Yes, I do." Sophia stood, meeting his eyes with steady determination. "That's my project too. Those are my buildings, my vision, my work that he's trying to destroy. If we're partners, then we face this together." Kieran's smile was fierce, proud, completely possessive.
Together.
20 minutes later, they arrived at the Harbor District site to find chaos. Richard Pemberton stood in the middle of the construction area with 6 men who definitely weren't city inspectors, pointing at various aspects of the project while someone with a camera documented everything they said. "He's creating evidence," Catherine observed grimly. "Filming himself, discovering safety violations that his people probably just created." "Not anymore," Kieran said, and there was something in his voice that made Sophia shiver with anticipation rather than fear. They approached the site as a group, and Sophia could see the exact moment when Pemberton realized he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. His face went pale as he recognized not just Kieran, but the people flanking him. "Richard," Kieran said pleasantly, his voice carrying clearly across the construction site. "Working late tonight?" "Just conducting a routine safety inspection," Pemberton replied, but his voice shook slightly. "There have been complaints about corner cutting, safety violations." "From whom?" Elena asked, stepping forward with a kind of authority that made it clear she was used to cross-examining hostile witnesses. "What agency authorized this inspection? What credentials do these men have to evaluate construction safety?" Pemberton's mouth opened and closed without sound. "Here's what I think happened," Kieran continued, moving closer with predatory grace. "I think you decided that destroying my business reputation wasn't enough. I think you decided to try sabotaging my project directly. I think you brought these men here to plant evidence of safety violations that you could then discover and report to the city. That's ridiculous. Is it?" David held up his phone, which had apparently been recording since they arrived. "Because we have you on camera directing these men to specific locations, telling them what to document, coordinating what appears to be a deliberate effort to manufacture evidence of code violations. You can't prove." "Actually, we can." Catherine's voice was coldly professional. "Because 3 of the men you brought with you tonight are ex-employees of Meridian Development who were fired for falsifying inspection reports on previous projects. We have their employment records, their disciplinary files, and documented evidence of their history of creating fake safety violations for competitive advantage." Sophia watched Pemberton's face crumble as he realized how thoroughly he'd been outplayed. This wasn't just about catching him in the act. This was about having anticipated his moves so completely that every aspect of his plan had been documented, analyzed, and prepared for. "Here's what's going to happen," Kieran said, his voice carrying absolute finality. "You and your men are going to leave my property immediately. You're going to destroy any footage or documentation you've created tonight. You're going to publicly apologize for the harassment campaign against Miss Rivers and admit that your allegations were fabricated. And if I refuse?" Kieran's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then I'll ensure that every potential client in the Pacific Northwest knows exactly what kind of businessman you are. I'll make sure the state licensing board reviews every project you've ever worked on. I'll have your personal and professional reputation so thoroughly destroyed that you'll be lucky to find work as a night security guard." The threat was delivered calmly, matter-of-factly, with the kind of certainty that made it clear this wasn't bluster, it was promise. "You're finished in this city, Richard," Kieran continued. "The only question is whether you leave with some shred of dignity intact, or whether I have to completely destroy you to make my point." Pemberton looked around the group of people surrounding him, perhaps finally understanding that he wasn't just facing one angry developer, he was facing something much more dangerous and coordinated. "Fine," he said finally. "We'll go." "Smart choice." As Pemberton and his men retreated toward their vehicles, Sophia found herself watching the people around her with new understanding. This wasn't just business. This wasn't just friendship. This was something deeper, stronger, more dangerous than she'd fully comprehended. This was what it meant to be part of Kieran's pack. "Well," Marcus said as the last of Pemberton's vehicles disappeared into the night. "That was more exciting than our usual Friday dinners." "It was also necessary," Elena added. "Some people only understand one kind of language." "The question is," David said, looking directly at Sophia, "how did our potential new family member handle her first pack confrontation?" All eyes turned to her, and Sophia realized this had been as much a test for her as it had been a resolution of the Pemberton problem. They'd wanted to see how she'd react under pressure, Whether she'd support Kieran or try to moderate his response, whether she'd be an asset or a liability in the kind of situations that apparently arose regularly in their world. "I handled it," she said simply. "And I'd handle it again, if necessary." Kieran's smile was proud, possessive, completely approving. "She's perfect," he said, and Sophia could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Yes," Sarah agreed, looking at Sophia with maternal approval.
"She is."
As they walked back to their cars, Kieran fell into step beside Sophia, his hand finding hers in a gesture that was both tender and claiming. "Any second thoughts?" he asked quietly. Sophia looked back at the construction site, then at the people who'd stood with them tonight, then at the man who'd just demonstrated exactly how far he'd go to protect what mattered to him. "None," she said firmly. "This is exactly where I belong." Kieran's smile lit up the night. "Then let's go home and start planning a wedding." Chapter 12. 6 months later. The wedding reception was held in the Hartwell Building's restored main hall, with late spring sunlight streaming through the original stained glass windows and casting jeweled patterns across the polished hardwood floors. It was perfect, Sophia thought, watching their guests mingle among the architectural details she'd fought so hard to preserve. Their love story had begun with this building, with conflict over its fate, and now it was witnessing their promise to build a future together. "You're glowing," Catherine said, appearing at Sophia's elbow with a glass of champagne and an expression that was as close to sentimental as the security expert ever got. "Marriage suits you." "Thank you." Sophia accepted the champagne, though she'd barely touched alcohol all day. She was too happy, too present in every moment to need any artificial enhancement. "It suits him, too." Across the room, Kieran stood with Marcus and James, his head thrown back in laughter at something one of them had said. He looked relaxed, genuinely happy in a way that Sophia had learned was rare for him. The expensive tuxedo couldn't hide the easy confidence with which he moved through their guests, making sure everyone felt welcome, that the celebration was perfect. Making sure his bride was cherished and celebrated by everyone who mattered to them. "He's been different since you came into his life," Catherine observed. "Happier. More complete." "I feel the same way," Sophia admitted. "Like I spent my whole life looking for something without knowing what it was, and then I found him." "You found each other," Catherine corrected. "And you've built something together that's stronger than either of you could have created alone." It was true. Over the past 6 months, their professional partnership had flourished beyond either of their wildest expectations. The Harbor District project had become a model for preservation-focused development, generating interest from cities across the country. 3 major publications had featured their work, and Sophia had been invited to speak at conferences about the future of architectural preservation. More importantly, they discovered that working together felt like destiny. Kieran's business acumen and resources combined with Sophia's vision and expertise created something magical, projects that honored the past while embracing the future, developments that strengthened communities rather than displacing them. They were changing how preservation worked in America, one building at a time. "Mrs. Blackthorne," a familiar voice said behind her, and Sophia turned to find Elena approaching with a smile that held just a hint of mischief. "I still can't get used to hearing that name." "Neither can I," Sophia confessed. "But I like it. It suits you. You were born to be an alpha's mate." The word should have triggered her old independent instincts, should have made her bristle at the implication that she was defined by her relationship to Kieran. Instead, they made her feel proud, powerful, complete. Because being Kieran's mate didn't diminish her, it amplified her. It gave her the security to take risks, the resources to pursue her vision, the support to become everything she'd ever dreamed of becoming. "Speaking of which," Elena continued, "your husband is looking for you." Something about a surprise. Sophia followed Elena's gaze to find Kieran moving through the crowd toward them, his expression holding that particular combination of satisfaction and anticipation that usually meant he was up to something. "Ladies," he said when he reached them, his voice warm with affection and something that might have been excitement. "I need to steal my wife for a moment."
Wife.
The word still sent heat spiraling through her every time he said it, particularly in that low, possessive tone that made it sound like a claim, a promise, a benediction. "What's the surprise?" Sophia asked as he led her toward a quieter corner of the reception hall. You'll see. Kieran's smile was mysterious, entirely too pleased with himself. But first, I have something I need to tell you. Should I be worried? You should be amazed. He stopped near one of the tall windows, where the afternoon light created a perfect frame around them. Do you remember that first day we walked through the Harbor District buildings? When you told me about the craftsmen who built the Hartwell building, about how they put cathedral-level detail into commercial architecture because they believed their work was a form of prayer. Of course. You said that maybe your preservation work was prayer too. That it was about believing beautiful things deserve to survive, that the stories they tell matter enough to fight for. Sophia nodded, wondering where this was going. I've been thinking about that, Kieran continued. About the stories these buildings tell, about the legacy we leave behind, about what really matters when we're gone. Before Sophia could respond, he pulled something from his jacket pocket, an envelope, thick and official-looking, with the kind of letterhead that suggested legal documents. What is this? Open it. Sophia's hands weren't entirely steady as she broke the seal and pulled out what appeared to be incorporation papers. But as she read, her breath caught. The Blackthorne Rivers Foundation for Architectural Preservation, she read aloud. Kieran, what? $50 million in initial funding, he said quietly. Enough to save a dozen buildings like the Hartwell. Enough to establish preservation programs in cities across the country. Enough to make sure that the stories these buildings tell never get lost. Sophia stared at the papers, trying to process what he was offering her. This wasn't just money. This was the ability to change how America thought about its architectural heritage. This was the resources to save buildings that would otherwise be lost, to create something that would outlast both of them. This is incredible, she whispered. But Kieran, $50 million. Is what I made on the Harbor District project alone, he finished. Money I made because of your vision, your expertise, your stubborn refusal to let beautiful things be destroyed. It seems appropriate that it should go toward making sure more beautiful things survive. The generosity of it, the thoughtfulness, the way he'd created something that honored both her passions and their partnership, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. There's more, Kieran said, and his voice held a note of barely contained excitement that made her look up from the papers. More what? More surprise. Look at the board of directors. Sophia's eyes scanned the list of names, expecting to see Kieran's usual business associates. Instead, she found something that made her heart swell with emotion and possibility. Marcus Chun, whose restaurants had become gathering places for communities in transition. Elena Vasquez, whose legal work had helped dozens of small businesses navigate the complexities of urban development. Sarah Mitchell, whose veterinary clinics served neighborhoods that other practices had abandoned. David Kim, whose security consulting helped protect the vulnerable. James Morrison, whose project management skills had made their Harbor District success possible. Catherine Reed, whose strategic thinking could help the foundation navigate the complex world of nonprofit work and political advocacy. Our family, Sophia said softly. Our family, Kieran agreed. The people who understand what we're trying to build, who can help make sure this foundation actually changes things instead of just existing on paper. Sophia looked around the reception hall, seeing their guests with new eyes. These weren't just wedding attendees, they were the beginning of something bigger. A network of people who understood that preservation wasn't just about buildings, but about communities, about honoring the past while building the future. Thank you, she said, but the words felt inadequate for the magnitude of what he'd given her. Thank you for showing me that some things are worth preserving, Kieran replied. Thank you for teaching me that building something beautiful is more important than building something profitable. Thank you for being the kind of woman who's worth becoming a better man for. The confession, delivered in that low, honest voice she'd learned to treasure, made her eyes fill with tears of pure happiness. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Kieran's hands cupped her face with devastating gentleness. More than I ever thought possible. More than I knew I was capable of. You've made me understand what it really means to be an alpha. Not someone who dominates, but someone who protects, provides, and cherishes what matters most. And what matters most? You, he said simply. Our family, the legacy we're building together. The beautiful things we're going to preserve and the beautiful things we're going to create. The kiss that followed was soft, tender, full of promise and possibility and the kind of deep, abiding love that could weather any storm. When they finally broke apart, Sophia realized that several of their guests had gathered nearby, watching with indulgent smiles and knowing looks.
Speech.
Marcus called out. The bride and groom need to make a speech. Actually, Kieran said, his voice carrying easily through the hall as conversations quieted, my wife has something she'd like to share with all of you. Sophia looked at him with surprise, then at the expectant faces of their family and friends. A year ago, she would have been terrified to address this kind of gathering. Now, surrounded by people who loved and supported her, standing beside the man who'd helped her become everything she was meant to be, she felt only excitement. 6 months ago, she began, her voice clear and strong. I came to Seattle to save a building. I thought I was fighting for architectural preservation, for historical significance, for the stories these old structures could tell. She paused, looking around the room, seeing the faces of people who'd become family, who'd taught her what it meant to belong somewhere completely. What I found instead was something much more valuable. I found partnership. I found family. I found a man who saw my passion and didn't try to moderate it, but gave me the resources and support to pursue it completely. She turned to look at Kieran, seeing the pride and love and possession in his eyes. I found my mate, she continued. Someone who complements my strengths and supports my dreams and makes me want to be worthy of the faith he has in me. Someone who taught me that the most beautiful things we can preserve aren't made of stone and steel. They're made of love, trust, and the unbreakable bonds we forge with the people who matter most. The applause that followed was warm, genuine, full of the kind of affection that comes from people who've witnessed something real and rare. As the celebration continued around them, Kieran pulled Sophia close, his arms encircling her with possessive tenderness. Ready for forever? He asked quietly. Sophia looked around the room one more time, at the building they'd saved together, at the family they'd chosen, at the foundation papers that represented the future they were going to build. With you, she said, rising up on her toes to brush her lips against his. I'm ready for anything. Kieran's smile was fierce, triumphant, completely devoted. Mine, he murmured against her mouth. Yours, she agreed. Always and forever. As the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Mr. and Mrs. Blackthorne danced in the building where their love story had begun, surrounded by the people who'd helped them understand that the strongest foundations aren't built on dominance or submission. They're built on partnership, trust, and the unshakable knowledge that together they could overcome anything. Some stories end with conquest. Others end with surrender. But the best stories, the ones worth preserving, end with two people choosing each other, again and again, building something beautiful that will last forever. This was one of those stories. The end.